The 1970s and 80s seem to have been an amazing time for the fantasy genre. All kinds of really beautiful and kind of graphic sci-fi and fantasy mixtures on comic books, movie posters, just wow. Wow. Like when you hear that like synth sound, that is basically what I imagine like immediately. And one of the things that happened in the 80s was a Ralph Bakshi film called Fire and Ice. And trust me, it lacks fire. Literally, there's very little fire in this movie. There's plenty of ice because the bad guy is like an evil ice queen, but no fire from the other side. Was it just too hard to animate? I can't believe that. No, if anything, I would think fire would be so much fun to animate. Would it be too like uncontrollable and hard to tame? No, honestly, if they just did some like flaming arrows, I would have been content, but they did not. So maybe the title isn't as literal as it could have been, and the fire is the human spirit of survival and defeating evil. Sure. I'm just gonna say up front, I didn't really like this movie. I found it kind of boring. Yeah. Really what's fascinating to me is all the people that worked on it behind, like, whew, like Mr. Baxi hired a lot of very interesting artists. He hired Frank Frazitti, who made a lot of really gorgeous like comic book covers and did a lot of like Hollywood movies in the 60s throughout like the 90s. And yeah, his work is pretty epic. Yeah. Apparently he was like a co-writer and director on this, so I don't know, is there a deeper comic book source to make this? Do I have to blame like comic book, I don't know, artists for a limited imagination on movement? That doesn't seem fair. Do I have to blame them for a limited amount of interesting dialogue? No, no. Dialogue doesn't have to be important to make a good film. It really, really helps, but not with an action film. But there wasn't that much action to me. Now, this movie was based around the time where there was a lot of He-Man stuff, Conan the Barbarian and all that, where macho-ness and the wild and a little bit of xenophobia and eroticism were in the mix. Yeah, and you had these barbarian warriors very loosely based off, I don't know, cavemen or Vikings, but what pisses me off is how hairless so many of them are, how clean shaven. Like, God, give some stuttle. Like, ugh. Just the boringness of their designs. I guess, basic is fine, and back then just men having earrings was cool enough, but I don't know, the lack of scars, and this was all rotoscoped. I don't know, the lack of real, like, indentions on the bodies just pissed me off. But what was beautiful was the backgrounds, the layouts were very, very lovely. And who do I have to thank for this? Have you ever heard of I think it's a children's series called Dinotopia? Yeah, the story of that isn't important, but the illustrator, James Gurney, does lovely work. Absolutely beautiful stuff. Oh, God, it's better than fantasy. It truly is. It's very, very, very lovely. I never even read the books, but I just loved poring over the images because they were simply lovely. They were like the dream utopia, and the fact that we're dinosaurs just made it a little whimsical. He worked on this movie. Thomas Kincaid, the guy who makes those really corny calendars. Yeah, back in his younger days, he might have had a different vision, a different style. Yeah, and it was a you can kind of tell some areas that kind of look like his stuff because of all the use of color. Not like an annoying blast of rainbow, but he throws color like little bits of pinks and greens and blues in areas that are supposed to be just like black and gray. Like, because, it's earthy and at night, but it gives it a pop. So, yeah, lovely, lovely stuff. And apparently, Peter Chung, who was also a comic book author and did some stuff in like 80s cartoons, he was part of it. But it doesn't really look like any of his character designs to me, so maybe he was in charge of the movements. God, I hope not. I, yeah. So all these artists were pretty talented, but gosh, does the story lack. Now, because it's an action movie, I know it's not supposed to have a particularly complicated, plot. But oh, the movements were just so slow, and usually, like, kind of rickety and jaggedy movements, especially with older animation, is charming to me. But here it was just dull. There was stabbing, there was screaming, there was a lot of crawling on the ground, but ugh. Oh, and let's talk about Princess Tigra. Oh my goodness. She's a princess captured by the bad guys, and, she often manages to run away from them, but then gets captured again. Her ass is its own character in this movie. I see more of her ass than I do any other part of her. Her face, her chest, and oh my goodness, like, I wish the dudes had half as much as the sensual scenes that she did, just for the sake of evency. But no, the dudes don't get abs, they don't get rippling muscles, and yet we see her plump bosom and hindquarters and long legs throughout the film. And just the most suggestive and porn ridden like scenes. There is actually a moment where one of the bad guys has her chained up and he's like pulling her head like from out of scene of the ground as if she was giving him a BJ, and wow, just ew and wow. Yeah, so at best she does manage to, keep up on her own, but again, the part where they don't let her be even the little bit dirty or scarred throughout this whole movie, I don't know, it just felt too clean and it pissed me off. It's like, God, if you're going to be outside, get some dirty. It's like when you watch other action films and the hair is still perfect and the lip gloss is still pretty. That just ugh, make them look a little more, I don't know, roughed up. Make them look like they've been outside. Give them a tan. So, yeah, those are our good guys. There's also this dude that very loosely seems to represent the Native American hero. He seems to be the only one who knows what he's doing. Yeah, the other two kids, the apparent hetero couple, just because they're the only two people their age around the area. Yeah, he manages to do a lot of the more useful things in the movie. I'm not saying that he has particularly cool action, but his confidence and intelligence I can respect. Oh, and then you got our bad guy, who is an ice king, and oh my goodness, the animation for when he's using his powers looks like he's coming. I'm not even exaggerating. Like, the choice they did to like animate the ice is their business, but in the beginning, when you look at his face, like from the chin, like coming from this, and the way he's like gasping, oh my god. It's cool to enjoy your powers, yeah, that's fine, but oh dear lord. Oh, and a little subplot with him is his mom wants grandchildren, so that's why the princess was captured. But when, she presents the princess to him, big spoiler, he's like, I don't want this. When did I say I wanted this? Get rid of her. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he just does not care. In that moment, the princess naively, but somewhat nobly, tries to, make peace with the dude, mostly so he doesn't kill her family. But he laughs her off, and I don't blame him. I don't. The fact that she tried to, keep an upper lip and tried to talk to the dude, kudos, but ugh. Oh, and then 5 minutes later, the blonde dude comes in and he's willing to fight. And for the first time I can remember since the movie started, he's like, you killed my father. That's why I'm here. At first, I just thought they needed a blonde guy. And that's when, our Ice King actually seems interested. It's like, okay, yeah, let's have a little erotic fighting. Yeah. God, can I just say that you don't really see much magic from him? You see a little magic from like his witch mom and some other witch in the movie, but his powers are mostly him just waving his hands and these sound effects. That just seems like a waste of effort. Like, it doesn't really look like brain control as much as they forgot to put the superpower look to it. Now, maybe it's unfair for me to compare him to characters like Jack Frost and Elsa, who had beautiful ice powers, but I don't know, it just felt like something was missing. So, ugh. Should other people see this movie? I think if you're definitely a fan of, you know, clothing optional sort of movies, then it's fine. I think if you just want an 80s sort of vibe, it's definitely got the vibe down. If you just want to look at pretty backgrounds, not so much pretty animation, I admire rotoscoping, but I wish it was done more interestingly. Or even if it is rotoscope, throw some fantasy stuff in there anyway. Not just stuff that we can see a, live action actor doing, but some more interesting stuff. Anyway, so I don't know, as an animation study, it's fine. Mostly to see what more could we have done with this? I feel like it had potential to be more interesting, but the lack of magic, the lack of action, the lack of motivation other than just, staying alive in this world, meh. And I know this is sappy of me, but I didn't like how the animals were killed so easily and they were the only ones that really had blood when they were hurt or stabbed. I'm just being an animal lover. It annoys me in other movies when people get hurt and they don't get bruised and bloodied. At least the animals bleed in this. Reminds you that they're real and alive. Not so much with the people, so blah. Let's see. If you're a bit of a perv and just want to see, the curves of a lady up close in your face, then sure. Yeah, have a good wank. But Fire and Ice, I did not. No. No. You are definitely not a preferred movie to me for any reason. I'm happy I saw you because I feel like I really got a good taste of the 80s. Usually, when I think of the 80s, I think of, cheerful John Hughes movies. I have to remember there were other movies that happened, and this is one of them. Uh huh.